This happened in the early years of my ministry and still brings a smile every time I recall it. In the early 1980s, when I was serving the Unitarian Universalist Church in Rockland, Maine, I would have occasion to go over to Augusta, the state capital, from time to time. Augusta is about 40 miles inland from coastal Rockland. On one of those trips, I stopped by the Augusta UU Church to visit with a friend and colleague who was the minister there at the time. As I left the church and crossed the street to where my car was parked, I noticed a woman about a half block away walking towards me. As he got closer, I recognized her as someone I served on the board of directors of the local community mental health center in the Rockland area. Her name was Connie. I decided I would wait until she got a little closer to where I was standing, or she got to where I was standing, and we could have a friendly chit-chat. As she kept walking and got closer, I noticed she had kind of a dazed and glazed look on her face, to the point that she wasn't even aware of my presence. When she finally got about 10 feet away and was still not showing any sign of recognizing me, I said, "Hey, Connie, what's up?" My words had the effect of snapping her out of a trance. She looked at me with very wide eyes and practically yelled out, "Steve, what are you doing here?" I was so startled, I actually started to explain myself. I said, "Well, you see, I was talking to this minister friend of mine at that church over there, and now I'm getting ready to go back to Rockland." And we both quickly realized how ridiculous we both sounded and laughed a little bit as Connie told me her plight. She was a very active lay leader in her local Episcopal church in Camden, Maine, which is a tony little town about 10 miles up the coast from Rockland. She'd come over to Augusta for a meeting of a committee she served on for the Episcopal Diocese of Maine. As she was leaving town, her car conked out. She had it towed to a local dealership for the make of her car, only to be told the part needed would take a day or two for them to get, and they had no loaners available. Her husband was out of town on a business trip, and the call she'd made in an attempt to reach anyone else in Camden who might come over to her rescue went unanswered. You must remember this was all back in the dark ages, also known as the pre-cell phone era, so a cell phone was not an option. And in addition, the last bus for the day from Augusta that went over to the coast had already departed. Feeling completely at loose ends, poor Connie just started wandering down the nearest street in something of a fog about what to do next, when she almost, quite literally, walked right into me. Now, I was being rather nonchalant about this whole thing, and I casually said, "Well, hop in, I'll drive you over to Camden on my way home." She said, "You can drive me home?" I said, "Sure, we don't live that far apart. I'd be glad to take you over. Let's go." Well, not quite believing what was happening to her, she got in the car and we headed out of town. In a matter of just a few short minutes, my friend had gone from feeling completely high and dry and stranded some 40 miles from her home to being in a car that would take her right to her front door. For the first minute or two of our trip, she just kind of sat there in this sort of contemplative silence, processing all that had happened to her before blurting out, "Steve, now I know it's true. There really is a God." Yeah, well, I laughed too. In fact, I laughed so hard I nearly ran off the road, which would have taken the edge off the good fortune we were experiencing. But when I finally got over my laughing fit, I said, "Connie, this is really too rich. You are a faithful, devoted Episcopalian, and it takes a chance meet up with a Unitarian Universalist minister to finally convince you of the existence of God." We were both able to appreciate the humor and the irony in that, and in less than an hour I dropped her off at her house in Camden, headed down the coast to my home in Rockland. Well, one of the occupational hazards of the career I'm in is that I can take the most whimsical of happenings and go get all theological about it. So consider yourself warned, because that's what I'm about to do. Now, the fact of the matter is that had I come out of that church 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later than I did, the two of us would have never met up. And I am sure that Connie, resourceful person that she was, she would have eventually figured out some way to get herself home. I just happened to catch her when she'd been momentarily knocked off base and was trying to get her bearings. I'm also sure that part of her exclamation that there is a God was an expression of relief and joy and thankfulness that she'd been bailed out of a tough and unexpected situation by doing nothing more than wandering down a city street. But in addition to being profusely grateful to me, almost to the point of embarrassment on my part, she also felt the need to acknowledge the workings of some greater being or power and to be thankful on that level as well. She needed to offer up a sort of a cosmic thank you, so to speak. And so what I took, and still take, as a purely coincidental meetup was for her an indication of a greater hand at work. In her case, the hand of God. And this hand gave her an unexpected gift and blessing, even if it was delivered by a Unitarian Universalist minister for whom the idea of a supreme being doesn't quite work. Well, I'm not going to get into the question of which one of us was right. On that one, I defer to the wisdom of Bob Dylan in his song, One Too Many Mornings. You're right from your side, and I am right from mine. And so we now move into a season of Thanksgiving. As this time of year approaches, I have had some of my more theistic and non-UU friends give me a little good-natured ribbing about this time of year, saying something like, well, Thanksgiving must be a pretty challenging time for you since you don't really have anyone to thank. I have actually had that said to me. And I have to admit, it's one of those UU jokes I get a little weary of after hearing for about the 50th time. And it's one of those jokes with an edge to it. The edge being that you're not really properly celebrating Thanksgiving unless you're offering prayers of thanks to a supreme being giver who has purposely bestowed blessings upon you. Well, as with my friend back in Maine, I feel no need to argue the point behind the barb or to question the faith of those making it. Instead, I try to stay more focused on cultivating my own kind of faith instead. Because I am like Connie in the sense that I too feel a need from time to time to offer my own kind of cosmic thank you. As I hope is the case with each of you at various times in your life, I have my moments when life feels especially full to me, and when I simply need to say thank you for the life that I have. Who or what I am saying thank you to doesn't much matter to me. I prefer instead to allow myself to feel blessed by a cloud of mystery, cloud of wonder, sometimes a cloud of awe, over which I have little, if any, control, but in whose presence I feel nonetheless. When I get in this frame of mind, I find myself drawn back to some very wise words by the late Reverend Raymond Bond, a UU minister of many years. Among the words of wisdom he offered during his ministry are these: giving thanks has nothing to do with who or what produced the gift. It is rather a way of perceiving our life. Even in the midst of hurt and disappointment, when we see ourselves in a universe that gives us life and touches us with love, we praise. Well, that sure works for me. Thank you, Raymond. My prayer of thanksgiving is not one directed to a deity. Rather, it is my way of perceiving life. Even when life hurts, wounds, disappoints, frustrates, or angers me. Such a prayer is more of an attempt on my part to cultivate an ongoing attitude of gratitude than it is words addressed to a supreme being. Such thankfulness, again, is a way of perceiving life, and a way of seeing ourselves in a universe that gives us life, and in which we find love and care and inspiration. It is cultivating this kind of awareness, which, being human, is an awareness I fall in and out of. That is what constitutes my cosmic thank you. To Ray Bond's words, I would add those of the 14th century German mystic and theologian, Meister Eckhart. Words that also give us our sermon title for today. If the only prayer you ever say in your life is thank you, that would suffice. That would suffice. Indeed, that would suffice. Eckhart, said 14th century German, Eckhart was a Dominican priest who had to endure several charges of heresy over the course of his life for maintaining that one could experience the divine or the holy without intercessors, like the medieval church, for example. Now, the fact that the church of his day considered such an idea a heresy most likely meant that Father Eckhart was speaking the truth. He was one of those persons of faith, persons who arise over the ages, who can see beyond the particularities of their own faith to certain larger and more universal truths. And while neither Unitarianism nor Universalism had come into existence during his time on earth, I regard Eckhart as one of the spiritual ancestors of our liberal faith tradition. If the only prayer you say in your life is thank you, that would suffice. Like Ray Bond, Eckhart is speaking more about an attitude or a stance toward living than he is about the content of what a prayer of thanksgiving should contain, or to whom it should be or might be addressed. To simply and profoundly encounter one of those special moments of blessing in our lives is to offer Eckhart's prayer of thanksgiving, even if no words are spoken. Well, while I'm on the subject of medieval Catholic mystics with a strong heretical streak, I will also hold up Julian of Norwich. She lived in England about a century prior to Eckhart's time in Germany. And Julian lived a hermit-like, contemplative life within the church at Norwich, England. And she wrote what is believed to be the first book written by a woman in the English language, titled 16 Revelations of Divine Love. Anticipating our own Universalist forebears by a few centuries, she held that God was the source and embodiment of universal love and that there was no hell. Julian also believed that God was really a divine she, not he, and compared Jesus Christ to a wise, merciful, and loving mother. Like Eckhart, she too saw beyond the bounds of her own faith to its universal implications and meanings. And as is the case with Eckhart, I also regard Lady Julian of Norwich as a spiritual ancestor of our Unitarian Universalist faith. She and Eckhart were both prolific writers, and by the standards of their day, they each had, Julian of Norwich, like Eckhart, had a line for which she is especially noted and remembered. She said it came to her from God in one of her mystical visions in which she, that is to say God, said to her, that is to say Julian, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Lady Julian, the name by which she was generally known, lived in England during one of the more virulent outbreaks of the Black Plague, when people really and truly did drop like flies. In the cities, there was a crisis as to what to do with the bodies because they could not all be properly buried. They had to be carted off en masse and dumped in large pits on the outside of town. It might seem blasphemous in that kind of setting to speak the words, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, and attribute them to a loving and maternal God. And yet these simple words from Lady Julian have endured over the centuries. They found their way into various poems, including the poetry of T.S. Eliot. And like Eckhart's words, I think these words strike a universal chord. For as I read them and ponder over them, I hardly think Lady Julian was saying that everything was always hunky-dory. All she had to do was look around her as she surely must have done, to know that was not the case. What I take from these words, as I read them through my religious humanist lens, is the affirmation that life and love with capital L's are ultimately stronger and more resilient than death and despair and hatred, however much those latter things may seem to hold sway at any given time. I've been reminding myself of that over the past couple of days. Lady Julian's words are also a call to those who hear them and who truly get their message to hold fast to that which is good, to practice kindness, and to stand on the side of love. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. If the only prayer you say in your life is thank you, that would suffice. I suggest you take these words and these sentiments into the season of Thanksgiving that is now before us, and see what message they might offer for you. Stay with this thread just a bit longer as I begin to move to an end here. I'll come back to our Unitarian Universalist family and Ray Bond once more. Remember, he writes about being thankful even in the midst of hurt and disappointment. Yes, hurt and disappointment and the pain of loss are realities we come up against with as much, if not more regularly, than our thank you moments. We all live in the push and the pull between Eckhart's thank you and Julian's all shall be well on the one hand, and all those things that diminish and demean and cheapen life on the other. This is the tension in which we have to live. And it is in that tension that there are certain and simple truths I find worth holding on to. I'll state them personally while knowing and hoping they reach beyond me. However it may have been given me, and we reviewed that process a little earlier in the service, that very delightful exercise that Vicki led us through. However it may have been given me, I'm living the only life I have, during the only time given me to live it, and on the only earth and in the only universe in which I have to live it. What other choice do what other choice do we have, really? But to accept these truths and live with them and say yes to them. We are aware of the unfinished and unhealed parts of the world in which we live, just as we are aware of the unfinished and unhealed parts of our own lives. But we must still give thanks. For if ours were not a life, and if ours were not a world for which we can give thanks, then why would we even care about our lives or care about our world in the first place? To say thank you, or all shall be well then, is not to approve of all that comes your way or gets visited upon you. Rather, it is to face and take all that life gives us, and then, using the will, the resources, and the power of the human spirit, we can become agents of transformation. We become agents of transformation for ourselves, for those of you who we are in community here together, and to a world that stands in need of our care, our love, and our commitment. As already noted, we now approach a season whose themes are Thanksgiving, ingathering, and harvest. I hope we can use some portion of that time, however hectic it may become, for some reflection, for some discernment, for recommitment and rededication. Let us reflect in the days ahead on the content of our lives and of the times in which we live them. We live in very bountiful and in very troubling times, all at the same time. So let us then be mindful of what our yes and what our thank you and what our all shall be well means. Let us be aware of what these sentiments, what these words call us to. For we are the meaning makers. We are the bearers of life abundant, if that is, we believe it strongly enough. It is not then so much who we thank, but how we offer our thanks. How we offer our thanks to a world that needs our energy, our spirit, our generosity, and our commitment in moving us closer to that day when earth shall be fair and all her people one.